Mhm.
Hey everybody. This is a video with myself, Israel, and Lauren, talking about what we're learning through relationship, our recent experiences, and what they're birthing in us, and how that ties into a retreat that we're offering in November. And kind of as ever, when we have a retreat space and we have an inspiration and an idea for what the retreat space is and is about, there's a process that unfolds through us individually and the dynamic of our relationship that brings a deeper understanding and knowing of the energy that we want to offer. So yeah, we want to share a little bit about that.
Mhm. Well, first, like from the Christ path perspective, how Joshua says, like relationships are the means to our salvation. And then he shares how the special love relationship is the ego's chief weapon. And like the special love relationship can be, it's not just um like the special other, but it's also can be like a relationship to a business or a relationship to a role that we create a defense around, like we are this, or like an
Identification. Yeah.
identification.
Yeah.
um
I think with money
with money,
as
the
well.
special love relationship with money.
Yeah, food
Yeah,
is another big one, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Anything that we think can, like, we can hold on to save us
Mm.
from the deep inner work that it takes to trust God, really, trust
Yeah.
love.
I think it's a substitute, isn't it? It's creating a substitute for the love of God,
Hmm.
and that hope that lives in our little parts that are cut off from the whole, seemingly, that hope that they can get something,
Hmm.
like that they can get something. Like if I have enough money, right, then I'll know my value and my worth. I can get value and worth from this thing in the world,
Hmm.
or if I can just get enough affection, right, from this body over here, if I could just get that, then that's going to prove to me and show to me that I am worthy of that affection, or I'm good enough to receive love. And that really, I think, is the foundation of these special relationships, is
Hmm.
that there's a need within self and a seeming lack, and an attempt to hope, like what I would call a desperate, forlorn
Hmm.
hope, within these parts, that lack can be fulfilled through the other or through a thing in the world.
Hmm.
But we learn in the Christ path that the things of the world mean nothing and are inherently empty, um, which is a pain for these parts.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
And we also learn through the Christ path that Christ, the truth of who we are, is pure, unhindered, impersonal, intelligent with a capital I, sexual energy or creation energy.
Mm.
And so it's through looking at these deep core wounds around creation energy that we discover where we've blocked our direct union with God. And so, like from a somatic perspective, they say our erotic blueprint holds our deepest held fears, suppressions, like tucked away desires that we're scared to look at.
Mm.
So it all involves this creation energy, and why our
Yeah.
retreat is going to be called creation. But before we get to that, do you want to share a little bit about what?
What I really want to say is that this word sexual energy, um, that for parts of the mind looking from a very limited perspective, as soon as they hear the term sexual, it's about two bodies coming together in a physical sexual act,
Mhm.
right? And of course that's one small potentiality of sexual
It's
energy.
actually the last form, like,
That's what
and
Jeshua says is the physical. Yeah, exactly. You say that.
yeah, and from the Christ perspective, Joshua shares the last form of expression of this energy is two bodies coming together, but it's the first form that the unhealed mind, when it experiences this energy, goes to, of like, I want to have sex, or I want to,
Absolutely. It's like I can get something from
from
sex,
this energy.
the physical movement.
Yes. Which involves another body, or yeah. So do you want to share a little bit about what you were sharing with me earlier this morning?
Yeah, that kind of ties in, because there's obviously the physical expression and the physical action of sex, which can be incredibly beautiful. And obviously it can be the opposite of that as well, right? Depending on essentially the content of energy that we bring to it. What I'm learning at the moment, and kind of beginning a journey of integration within myself, is this communion, between my soul energy and my parts as well, coming into alignment with the energy of the Divine Mother. And
you want to speak to what parts are in case somebody doesn't know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in my understanding, the egoic mind, the mind in separation, is fragmented into so many parts. And so when I talk about parts, I'm really talking about, in the Christ language, we're talking about the egoic mind, but the egoic mind not as a singularity, not as one thing, but the egoic mind as many distinct parts, each with their own hopes, agendas, fears, needs, lacks, and the way that they express and try to fulfill and strategize to remain safe and protect the whole system of mind.
And examples of those that land for me is like the inner child, the rebellious teenager, the manager that tries to manage everything inside the that's examples.
Yeah, no, really, really good examples there. So I don't think we won't go too deeply into that system right now, although there is much more depth to that. But my process, my journey has been about, getting into connection from myself in a loving way with those parts, and also developing and cultivating relationship between myself as soul with the Divine Mother, really bringing awareness to this connection in the deep root energy with the earth, with the energetic of the earth, and the deep love and nurturance and holding that is there, these beautiful qualities of the mothering energy. And before I go further into the expression of the union between the mother and the father, the love of the mother that holds and opens, this feminine quality of opening to receive, of the receptivity of every cell in the body to receive, and the influx of the father energy, which is pure light, and coming into the balance of that, and how we can be imbalanced within that. Where was I? I've lost myself there.
Before you talk about that, you want to talk about yourself and your parts.
Yeah, myself and my part. Thank you. That's exactly right. Because I wanted to talk about the way that my parts have tried to substitute, different things for the mother's energy. Essentially, for me, there was one overriding energy that I wanted from the mother that wasn't there in my upbringing. And that's because that's what I chose to incarnate into. And it was the frequency of energy already present in my mind, through my conditioning in separation. And that energy that I really coveted was comfort, was the comfort of being held, was the comfort of being safe and in that embrace. And for many of my parts, that translated as sex. It was like that was the ultimate, movement of acceptance, allowance, and comfort that could come. And I won't go into my whole journey through this relationship, but maybe that's another video to really explore the outward movement of these parts into the world in all of these different threads and through fantasy in mind to try to get comfort from others. And the arc of our relationship has been me, really, and obviously Lauren has her own journey within this, but from my perspective, it has been one of quite distinct unconsciousness around the nature of my energy moving in the world in this way, and then being, kind of shown, thank you, Lauren, like that this is a real energetic. This is a real thing. It's fantasy in the mind, but there's a reality to this.
What do
And
you mean, like making up fantasy in your mind and then
yes,
energetically it's kind of distorted, like
absolutely, absolutely. It's like if I think about somebody, right? If I'm thinking about somebody, there's an energetic connection being formed that is real,
mhm.
right? And I think for so much of the world perspective, that's not real, right? It's a fantasy. But of course,
In
in
reality.
reality, we're living in a fantasy in which there are realities to this. And that connection then creates a thread of energy. And there were many threads of energy because I was somebody who, and again, this is probably a whole other video, because I was somebody who hadn't felt confident moving in the world sexually, and yet at the same time had like desperately sought the comfort of sexuality, of sex in the world. I'd created a very profound fantasy world for myself that essentially kept me alive and sane in the world up until a point in which it's just not appropriate to continue holding those energies and also moving into the work that I want to move into, that I am moving into. It's wholly inappropriate to be holding those energies.
Mhm.
So that movement, it's a beautiful thing. It's like I've pulled myself back in from the world, being like, yeah, that's not what I want to do anymore. And that was a big process. And my parts are kind of like, yeah, but where and how do we fulfill this need birthed from our lack of comfort from the mother, essentially? And it was like, oh, this here, right here. Perfect. This is how I get what I need, right? It's from Lauren. And of course, whenever I'd come towards Lauren in need from my lack, Lauren was like, oh, no.
Right.
Do you want to share a little bit about how that was for you, or?
Yeah, I think once, well, what in our creation retreat, we'll take others through these practices that want to go through these practices. But I think when I started being educated about sexual energy and about my own anatomy and about it became, as I started becoming more in alignment with myself, it became really, you could feel it when someone was coming at you from need because you're doing this work within yourself. And so as he would come at me with a need, it would just feel like ugh in my system, you know. But when he would come towards me from his wholeness, well, then that's beautiful. It's like, oh, I want to share in our wholeness. But when need, it almost feels like a grasping energy of like, and it become as we do this work, this as we become more clear in ourselves, we realize how much of the world is operating from like trying to get from each
Absolutely.
other, it becomes very apparent. And then we have to become like really compassionate with self and others. At first, there's just this big everything, but then it becomes into, into
That's
love.
really been your journey, hasn't it?
Right, about like having
Soften
compassion.
the edges of that. Ugh.
Yeah. And so that's what it was for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
So in the last month, we decided, this has been a 3-year journey since we've become in a
Yeah.
relationship,
Almost to the day.
almost the day. And so as part of our own initiation with ourselves, guided by God, really, was to take a whole month of being in no communication at all. As far as Zoom, like we didn't Zoom each other. We did receive 2 messages from each other just to check in the whole month.
Cool.
But it was to be completely out of touch with each other.
It was. It
And
was.
do you want to share your process with that?
Yeah, I want to say that there was some resistance in me to begin with, and I think I had some parts that were feeling worried that this was the end of our relationship. But equally, the space allowed an opportunity for the parts to settle in a way that I don't think they would have been able to if we maintained communication. I think at the time we were activating each other very strongly. I think there was a lot of fear and anxiety and judgment from both of us coming up. And that space really allowed like what I would call like the integration of the last 3 years of work to fall into place. I want to say this because I think it's really important. Like I created this context through our relationship in which I was completely cornered, right? Because my old pattern of generating fantasy was cut off. That's not okay. It's I'm in a monogamous relationship, right? And just because I'm not physically being with somebody doesn't mean that I'm not in a movement of betrayal of the monogamy through fantasy. This is a revelation for me. It really was, and it's taken a lot to get underneath like what the process of that is and what the need is underneath it and what the lack is that gives birth to the need. Then having that aspect or that direction, that avenue, like that's not a part of my reality anymore. And then having this like, okay, well then I bring all of this energy of my need to Lauren, and Lauren's like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me either. And like, well, where do I go? And it was like, okay, of course, the only place left for me to fulfill this part that lived in lack was to come within and essentially connect with the mother, because that's so obviously what I was lacking. And I didn't really want to admit that to myself on many levels of my being, which seems completely ridiculous to me now, having made connection with the mother and felt the deep beauty of this and the safety and the comfort that is there, that is in complete harmony with my relationship with Lauren.
Yeah.
Right?
And so you're talking about, just so people that aren't from this path, coming in contact with the mother within yourself.
Yes.
Like the energetic quality of the mother that holds within self.
Yes, exactly. It holds within self. That is, for me, what I'm learning about the mother, it is the physical manifestation of creation. So the mother is this body. The mother is in every cell. The mother is very present in the earth, in the plants, in the nature, in the animals. There is this divine quality to the physicality. And I love this expression of as above, so below. And what I take that to mean in this sense is that just as there is the divinity above, there is the divinity below, and there is no separation. And actually that oh gosh, that feels so good in my system just to say that. Like there's a relaxation and a dropping down into my heart. It's like that's very, very beautiful. So yeah, this has been the journey, and this month apart has really allowed me, because I remember the first, I think we'd had a little bit of an argument, and we decided to have this month apart, which did feel right, but felt wrong to some of my parts. But I remember lying on my bed afterwards and just feeling like, okay, but then I want only God, and I don't think I'd ever expressed that to myself with such integrity and sincerity. And it was almost immediate. As soon as I expressed that with that integrity and sincerity, there was response. And there was a response that I could allow and welcome. And then that's become an ongoing process. So in our retreat around creation, like there's going to be an observation, if you like, in the ways in which we do seek from things in the world. Another great one for me was chocolate. And interestingly, and I think this is really interesting, ever since that moment in which I connected with the mother and that has opened up in me, I've stopped eating chocolate effortlessly. And it was a conscious decision, but and I've made that decision before, but it hasn't stuck and it hasn't been effortless. And I know from having given up alcohol and drugs before, how when that movement is perfectly aligned, like the cessation of habit and addiction is effortless.
Mm-hmm.
but it has to come in that moment through the connection with something else, something more sustainable and real.
I like the idea that we can't fool God. So it's like if we're not actually wanting, like God doesn't respond. Like it's not like God, we can't fool the truth with himself,
Mm,
And so
true.
yeah, so at creation retreat, because if we think of creation, I loved how you described it earlier. Will you describe that? The love when the light.
Yeah. So this deep communion with the mother brings love. Like the mother is love. She's pure love. And the quality of that in the experience of a body is comfort, is holding and nurturance, and is what I see and feel as this opening. It's an opening of the contractions in the body. It's an opening of where the cells themselves have shrunk in and contracted, holding in shame or guilt or anger and rage or fear or whatever it is that's happened that has caused this. The mother comes in with this infinite love that allows the opening. It's like it's a little bit like the image I have often is either a baby on the breast or a toddler in the lap or a child in the lap or even a teenager sitting down with a fully conscious mother and being able to just open and share
Mhm.
everything, just letting it all out. So there's this opening, and of course the divine feminine is infinitely receptive. It's this opening of energy, and what that does in the system is it then allows for the penetration of the light of the father to enter the cells of the body. And within that union, when the love of the mother is penetrated by and met by the light of the father, it's no wonder the Jeshua calls to Christ energy, unhindered, pure, intelligent, sexual energy, because this is the movement. This is the movement, or it is a sexual act between the love of the mother and the light of the father coming inside. And the creation of that is Christ. That's again, when I say that, it's very beautiful in my body just to say that.
Mhm.
Um, and that really is the essence of the work, because the feeling quality of the light meeting and penetrating the love is pleasure.
Mhm.
It's joy. It's a pleasantness in the system.
It's not seeking a pleasure to get out of a pain.
I
It's
love that.
actually just pleasantness. It's actually just full energy. It's the energy of
It's
life.
life.
It's
Yeah,
life that moves through
it's
us.
life. Yeah.
And interestingly enough, Jeshua through the Christ path, but all spiritual pathways have their unique essence of this. If you look at Kundalini, the mystery schools, or monastery, like all the different paths have their version of this. But Jeshua says in the Christ path, first comes the correction of mind, and then it's the healing of the heart and the awakening of the soul. And he says literally there's four stages of that, and that none of them can be bypassed. Like
Yeah.
we really have to look at the deep contraction held in the base of the body of fear, because the fear that's held there is blocking creation, is blocking, the repression, the judgment, the suppression, the denial, the oppression. We have to look at these that it's a living energy of
Yeah.
distortion, really. And so as healing comes, um, through seeing it in innocence,
Yeah.
healing comes and then light can inform even the cells of the body.
Exactly.
So at our creation retreat, so that's what I've been studying the last 6 years, somatic sex education, because it's been my own journey. Like I grew up very repressed, and I'm a demisexual being anyway. I've never been one. I'm very different than Israel in that I hated sex until 2018 when I started, like, this started opening within myself, and so mine's been about bringing innocence to where I would say it's like hard edges are within myself, like around around this living energy, just fear of it, really. We were talking earlier this morning, and I was laughing because in the book, Absence from Felicity, those are that are from the Course in Miracles path may have read that book. She talks about being like scared of Jesus. She calls him Jesus's energy, because she said, I'm not the bride of Christ. Like as he was starting to bring the energy of opening her system, the energy of life, she was scared to death of it, and that's why she edits it out. And of course, in Miracles, anytime we talked about sexuality, but so at our retreat, what we're gonna cover, it'll be 8 days, and we're gonna go really slow, and all of it's choice and voice. So there may be some practices that your unique being is not drawn to, and you go on a hike that day, or during those couple hours, or you journal, or you do what feels resonant for your own soul and self. But we cover authentic relating.
Yep.
And we cover like what gets in the way of authentic relating, which is usually our little parts that are defending what actually is wanting to be shared.
Yeah.
We talk about the wheel of consent, and like the way that energy moves, and how it moves when we're unconscious, and how it moves when we're actually just clear with what we want, what giving is, what receiving it truly is, what taking and allowing is. We will do breath work, which breath is the bridge from the subconscious mind to the mind. And that's part of the living practices of the Christ path as well. You don't have to be from the Christ path, because it's universal. These practices are universal.
It really is.
We'll be doing clothing optional yoga, so that's everything's choice, but clothing optional is a way of bringing the body back to neutrality. And there's guidelines in these practices as far as nobody's like staring, or it's a mindfulness practice of bringing the body, taking a collective journey through fear into self-discovery, compassion, and the body coming back to neutrality. We will do mindful genital mapping, which is bringing education to the genitals, and which creates new neural pathways of like a lot of times people refer to the genitals just as down there, or maybe have like a relationship that's not what would be the word, that's not giving one freedom in their life, that's feeling more like fearful. Like, is that
probably based in a judgment, or some kind of either avoidance, either some kind of pushing away of the genitals, or sometimes an attempt to grab it, and make it work for us.
So genital mapping is just a mindful way of re-educating ourselves on our genitals, which creates new neural pathways. We'll also have conversation around each of our, from the somatic perspective, it's called like each of our erotic blueprints, but like from Jeshua's perspective, it's looking at our deepest unconscious desires and seeing them in innocence, and just letting them come up and embracing them, and surrendering them to spirit's guidance.
Can I just say something there as well? Because Jeshua talks about the allowance of desire, but he does also put in a little clause that we're not bound by the allowance of a desire to act upon it, right? When we allow desire up into the mind, out of the unconscious, out of the contractions of the body, then we can come into true choice. Like, is this actually something I truly want? But often, because we have this relationship with our parts where we slip into identification with the part, and the part might be like, I really want this desire, and the soul's like, oh, good God, no, like this. But because we've fused with that part, and then we feel powerless within our system to make choice anymore, and then we can end up feeling like a victim of our desire and a victim of our own mind even. So this is a really valuable exploration to begin to tease out the nuances of energy, that just because I allow a desire to arise doesn't mean that I am obligated to act upon it.
Mhm.
Equally, there can be those parts that are like, yeah, this desire arises, and the soul is like, we really need to move towards this. And other parts are like, hell no.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no way I'm
Yeah.
doing that through fear. So it's about learning our own mind and system, becoming aware of the different ways in which we would avoid or try to indulge the system, and coming into a clearer perspective within our being of what our actual real self wants.
Mhm. Yeah. And then we'll also have practice with each other of being paired and asking for what you want and learning how to ask for what we want in innocence. Like, and the other person tunes in if this is this what I can give you. So it's like learning how to touch consciously. And yeah, it's conscious touch without like this like anyway, all the
Yeah,
unconscious
we will
things
tease
that
out
happen.
all
All
of those ways in which the parts want to try and get, and
Yeah.
which is perfectly okay as well,
It's
right?
okay. It's seeing it in
It's
innocence, but it's
innocent.
coming into healing with all this.
It's like mindfulness. You were talking
Yeah.
about mindfulness through all of this practice of just getting to know our mind.
Yeah. And yeah. And so anyway, it's about like all our deepest wounds came through relationships, really, and not knowing how to relate in relationships.
Yeah.
And so it's through relating, at retreat that we learn how to come back into empowered choice and voice, and we learn how to be celebrated for our no and our yes and our, and so anyway, these are things that we will explore
We really
together.
will. We
Yeah.
really will. We'll
And
explore these things. Go on.
yeah, this will be my ninth retreat to hold of embodiment, and this is our fourth
This
retreat
is
to
our
hold
fourth
together.
retreat together. Yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah, and every time it's like just
It evolves.
it evolves. Yeah.
As we evolve, essentially, we are very much participants in
Yeah.
this journey.
Yeah.
And creating the retreats, but also at the retreats as well. It's always a huge learning process, and a privilege to be in a group, opening in vulnerability and learning. It's always equal learning. I mean, it's amazing to be in these spaces.
Yeah.
We have a beautiful venue
Mm-hmm.
as well in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And it's the 4th through, it's 8 days. So is that the 4th through the 12th?
That would make sense.
Yeah. So it's the 4th through the 12th of November. Yeah. And yeah, we'll have more information out probably late April, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Mhm.
That sounds about right.
So
Yeah, late April, maybe beginning of May, we'll have all of the costing and the prices and the website and the rooms available. It's just stunning.
yeah. And just so we know, all of these practices are evidence-backed, and they're all in clear containers. And yeah, so
yeah, I think that the absolute foundation of what we want to bring is safety.
yeah.
Holding, this is the core values really of our work. So yeah, I hope that you'll
If
be
you feel
interested.
called, yeah,
Yeah, drop us a line.
drop us a line.